Very good. Well, thank you all for joining us online. Thank you for those of you in the room. And so, Leigh Ann, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, okay. Where you grew up, and how you got from there to having a performing arts academy.
Okay. I'm an Atlanta native. There's not that many of us. I grew up in Conyers, so right outside of the city. And I got involved with the performing arts when I was little bitty. And I'm fortunate, I'm adopted. And so I was adopted when I was just a few days old. And my parents couldn't be less artsy fartsy, couldn't be less of all of the things that I love. But they saw that in me, pushed me in that direction, not pushed me, allowed me to run in that direction. And so all through school, I was always involved in dance and drama and all of those things. And then went to college to study music. I went to Shorter College in Rome. And so I have a music education degree. I studied music and theater in school, and with sort of the thought that I would graduate, and I, had this sort of, because I come from really practical parents, so I had this education degree so I could teach. But also, in my mind, I was going to be able to move to New York and be a Broadway actress and all of those things. But as I sort of continued on through school, realized that I too had a lot of practicality to me, and wasn't so sure that I wanted to wait tables forever, just hoping for, to be the one person in an audition of 10,000 people who got what. So I graduated from college. I started working as a teacher. I didn't love it. I didn't love public school for a lot of reasons, but leadership was a big part of why I didn't love it. And so I left that and did some other things, and realized, when my kids were young, I wanted to be home with them. So I was sort of a stay-at-home mom while doing a lot of freelance work. So I work with the Cobb Energy Center. I worked with lots of community theaters in Atlanta, lots of professional theaters in Atlanta, and I taught a lot of private voice and piano students out of my home. And so sort of through that process, I loved that. And I was asked a lot in this community, well, the students that I was working with, well, where can my kid go to take a class or do a show, or, they want to perform, where can they do that? And I always had to say, well, there's really not any place in Forsyth County for that to happen. And so after saying that enough, and, I went through kind of a tough divorce where I was a single mom for a while and trying to make ends meet with that sort of freelance thing, which who knew the braver thing was to open a business, but whatever, that's another thing for another day. But when John and I got married, I had re-upped my teaching certificate, and I was ready to take another teaching job. And I said, but I also have this idea. I have this idea for a business where the kids could come and we could do this thing. But I mean, when I tell you, I didn't know anything about owning a business. I mean, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what an income statement was. I didn't know what a balance sheet was. All I knew was don't spend more money than you make. That was the only guiding principle I had. And so we talked and we talked it out. And eventually John was like, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. And so we started looking for a space. We found this sort of, like I said, we're still in the same place, and it's an ugly building from the outside, but we found this space, and we had about 1,500 square feet. And I had, the very first open house we did was, John was taking people's checks for their registration fees, and he's doing the math of okay, only 5 more students and we might can make the rent this month, that kind of thing. And after that first semester with those 35 kids, the next semester we had 70 enrolled. And so we were like, ooh, okay, well, that's a good problem to have. And fortunately, when we were doing all of the lease paperwork, John was smart enough, because there was a second half of our building, and John was smart enough to ask the landlord, can we have first right of refusal if that other side opens up? It was at the time a CrossFit gym, or quasi CrossFit gym. And so they said, yes. And so that person was kind enough to not ever pay their rent. And so when they were allowed to leave, I mean, when I tell you, it was a big open warehouse with a boxing ring in the middle of the floor. We took that space over and we built a theater. And so, like I said, it doesn't look like much from the outside, but when you come inside, it's really magical. And the kids love to be there. We're very, I think we've created a really special place for kids and adults to feel safe and supported, like they can be creative and express themselves and learn about the performing arts. Because while I love, the theater stuff and the artsy stuff, what I love the most is all of the intangibles that come along with what the performing arts provides, because the kids come out and they know how to work as a team. They know how to speak in front of people. They know how to be responsible for themselves. They know that every part of what they're doing impacts other people, because theater is as much a team sport as soccer or anything else. And so we've just grown. And what I learned through the process was that I really love the business side of everything. And I didn't take I've never, college, like I can sit down and like notate out stuff about a symphony for you all day long, but all of it was useless. And so I've just learned from a lot of you, read a lot of books and that kind of thing. And it turns out that's the part that I really love, and the team building part of it. We have a team of about anywhere from 14 to 16 staff that work with us. I love that we're able to provide jobs for moms, who a lot of our employees are stay-at-home moms who get to do what they have college degrees in and experience in, but they get to be home with their kids during the day, and then they come and teach at night. So it's a nice balance for them to get to do what they're passionate about. So like I said, we started with those 35 kids. Now we have anywhere between 500 and 600 that come through every week in our different classes and productions. And we have a really good time.
Wow.
So there you go.
So someone that, didn't have a background in business.
Right.
And when you look back now at that journey of going from, and y'all know I'm a little biased in this. I'm married to someone in the arts, and I can only imagine what that journey would be like. We're just doing our taxes sometimes. So I'm trying to, when you think back about that, what were the most valuable lessons that you learned in doing that? And we'll start there. What was when you look back on that, what were some of the most valuable lessons?
I think the first thing for me was, I never feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. And so finding people that I knew I could trust to give me good advice. I mean, John is super smart, my husband. And so, we learned a lot together, I think, but, very early on, even the software company that I use to manage the back end of the business has a great team of professionals that do a lot of workshops and that kind of thing. And so that was how I connected with my accountant, who specializes in children's extracurricular activities. That's his thing. And so having those resources, and I think, honestly, I've always said just being brave enough to say, I don't know, has been the most important part of the process, because I have no shame in saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you explain that to me like I'm a 4-year-old? And I think that kind of, being willing to be sort of teachable has been really important through the whole process.
And so, and you're hitting on the very thing I was kind of thinking about next, and that is, so looking back on it, of course, a lot of people come into business and they have a lot of business background.
Yeah.
You didn't. That actually, do you feel like that worked to your advantage?
I kind of think it did in some ways, because I didn't come in with a textbook of the way to do things.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, my accountant, has sort of kind of KPIs that he'll say, okay, keep your payroll at this percentage, this is sort of industry standard. And having those kind of guardrails is helpful, but also at the same time, our business, one of the things that I realized along the way is that we kind of created a category. Most of the way children's performing arts training works is a theater that's typically a nonprofit is a theater company and they need to pay the bills. So they start classes because classes are regular income that don't depend on donors. And so what I've seen is that is sort of the industry standard for what I do. So being a for-profit business, I use that lightly. You can see my 10-year-old car outside. Being a for-profit business, I did it that way because I didn't want to be beholden to a board of directors that I couldn't control, honestly. I mean, truthfully, because I've been a part of so many theater companies over the years where all it took was a few people getting on a board and making unsound financial decisions to take the whole thing down. So it was important to me that I was able to, like, it was going to live or die by the decisions that I made. And I was okay with that. And so I think because we've sort of created a category that's different than the way that it's usually done, I think that's actually been a benefit for us because it's allowed us to think outside of the box, and it's allowed us to, I didn't have a bunch of preconceived ideas going in. I knew a lot of things I didn't want to do because I'd seen it in all of the theaters that I'd worked in, but it allowed me to sort of kind of go, okay, well, what if we, and our team say, well, what if we tried this? Well, what if we tried that? And it didn't, I feel like we haven't been boxed in by that.
When you look back on that time, is there anything that you can point to and say, gosh, I wish I'd done that differently?
Probably the biggest things that I think hiring is the most important thing that we do. And I've made a couple of mistakes with that, over the years. I think everybody does. And so I've learned a lot about the way that we hire now. So because we're a big empty building without our team. And so having the right people on the team is the most important part of what we do, because I'm also not a micromanager. It's really important to me. I'm not the kind of person who's going to constantly follow up. And when I say, hey, when we come up as a team with an idea and say, hey, this is what we want to do, I just trust that that's going to happen. And so it's important in the way that I hire that it does actually happen. And so I think that's the biggest sort of misjudgments I think I've made have been in hiring. And so now we have a sort of way that we do it where, our classes run typically the school year, August to May. And so in the summers, we do week after week after week of summer camps. And that gives me the perfect trial basis to get people in and see how they do with us before they really officially become part of the team. So that's sort of how we do that now. And we get people in and see, like, do they vibe with everybody else? Do they work well with the kids? Do they have a good attitude? Are they self-starters? Are they self-motivated? Do they have good ideas? And then once that summer goes by, we'll plug them into places. So it gives us a really nice trial of, and that has been a process that's developed over the years just from missteps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Because if you get somebody in August and you don't like them in September, it's a long way to May.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long way.
So before they even get to that point, what do you do to identify folks that before they even get to the trial?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this last night because I had a feeling we would talk about this, and I don't think I've ever hired anybody blind, like just from a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post or I don't think I've ever hired anybody that didn't come to me through a referral. And so our team, a lot of our team, like I said, some of them are stay-at-home moms who get to do this because it's, they're retired from public school teaching or whatever, but some of them still work professionally in all kinds of different ways in theater. And so we work really hard to all keep our networks really big. And so, and that's really important to our line of work too. I mean, I think it's true of everybody's line of work, but especially in something like the arts where people tend to be gig workers, or they tend to work short term for a project and then they're on to the next thing and on to the next thing. Word gets around if you're difficult to work with. And so we try to really keep our hands in that sort of sense of what the community vibe is about people. And so most of everybody that we hire tends to come to us through referrals, or, somebody will say, oh, I met somebody who's amazing, and you should meet them. And so we go have coffee and we kind of get a feel, and then that summertime sort of rolls around, or we'll bring them in for a workshop or something smaller, and then that kind of gives us momentum. Another thing we do is, and this is a shameless plug, we're about to run, opening tonight, Shrek the Musical. Feel free to take a postcard. We do, huh? Yeah. We do a big community theater musical every summer. It's kind of a passion project, and we donate to a local nonprofit every year a portion of those ticket proceeds. So, we've benefited CASA in the past and different organizations. This year, we're supporting the Forsyth Community Clinic, but we have 35 adult actors who are in our building all summer long who work in the arts, and we'll identify people that way too, because we spend a whole summer with them. And a lot of them are involved in all kinds of different areas of the art. Some of them have just regular day jobs. Like we've got accountants and teachers and whatever who just do this as something fun in the summers. But it gives us a chance to meet other folks who come in. And I've identified several people this summer in this cast where I'm like, I think that they should find a place with us. And so we'll talk about that. And another thing that we get to do that I think is unique is when we start to set our schedule of classes, I don't set the schedule of classes and then go find the people to fill the spots. I build the team, and then I say, when can you work this year? And then I build our schedule of classes around their schedule. So I do it kind of backwards. And I mean, I think that's one of those out of the box things that we have the privilege of doing because of the style of the business. But also it's a really great way to make sure that people are able to be committed exactly when you need them, because most of our teachers will teach 2 or 3 evenings a week. They're not there. I'm really we have 2 full-time employees. It's me and then our technical director. And other than that, everybody else is part-time. So I build the whole schedule around their availability, which is kind of another backwards way of doing things. But it allows me, again, if we're doing a short term, maybe I'm doing a 6-week segment of a class, that's a great chance for me to try somebody out, give them a chance to come in and see how they fit with the team, and then go from there. We also build a lot of leaders within our program. So we're really invested in the leadership development of the students that we serve. And so a lot of times we actually, like in the summers, half of our summer camp staff is made up of past students who are home from college. And that's not place fillers. That's not like I need an intern those are people really doing the hands-on work of what we're doing, because they're fantastic. I got a text from one of our former students the other day, and she said she's working, was with us all through high school, and then came back and worked in college and that kind of thing. And now she's graduated and she's working for Bank of America. And she texted me and she was like, I just want you to know that everything I learned in theater is what is making me successful at this job right now, because it gives me the ability to work with a team. It gives me the ability to have creative ideas, all of the different elements. And, she's working in banking. It's not, song and dance. I mean, a little right, yeah. So, getting that kind of feedback is amazing, because it validates, again, I always say, I don't care if any of our kids ever go and perform on Broadway. Some of them have, I don't care. I care that they're good human beings and they have all the soft skills that they learn from what we provide. That was a long-winded answer about employment, but
no, that's
here we are.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody else have any challenges with hiring? So that seems to be the universal business issue at the moment. So when you look ahead, what do you see? So we're coming to the end of summer, and which is weird to say when it's 98 degrees outside. But the school summer, that is. Right. But so we're coming to the end of that, and you're heading into another season. Like when you're looking ahead at the next 12 to 24 months, what concerns you, and then on the other end, what are the opportunities that you're most excited about?
I think that, even for us, staffing there are always tricky parts to that. And I think one of the, we don't get a lot of turnover. Most of the people who work with me have been working with me for most of the 10 years. We've added to the team, but we don't subtract a whole lot. So I have one key team member who's moving that I'm trying to figure out exactly what we want to do with that. But I think overall for us, there's a little bit of a barrier to entry into what we do, that we have to do some teaching of the parents. And so because people, if you did soccer growing up, or you did sports or whatever, and then your kid is kind of artsy and they did a show at school and their teacher told them about us, and you could do more shows a year if you go to us. Parents don't know what that means. They don't what does it mean for my kid to go do a show? Well, what do you mean that they're only in the ensemble and they don't have a big part? And how do I make sure they get all of those kinds of things. There's a lot of teaching that we have to do of the people who are actually paying us to do, not the kids are easy. The parents are sometimes the trickier part. And so that's one of the things that our team is really refining right now, is what methods can we use to figure out how to do that education sort of before classes start or as classes are beginning, to make sure, because it's just always kind of been, it's a refining process, because we try one thing and go, well, I don't, people are done reading emails. I don't know if you feel like that in your world, but I think people are inundated. We send a lot of information. We send a lot of pertinent information, and people are kind of done with scrolling through a long, wordy email. So we're trying to figure out, is video the next thing we need to do? Do we need to almost
TikTok videos? That's
right? That just stresses me out thinking about it. Or, do we need to almost think about it like through Leadership Forsyth, I was principal for a day at one of the elementary schools, and the principal was telling me that they kind of do almost like a podcast for their school announcement. So parents can play it in the car and just kind of listen while they're running carpool. So we're exploring all of those different things to try to figure out how we can continue, because as our community grows, there are plenty of people who never even heard of us, have no idea that we exist, because you're not going to drive by and notice us. And so as more and more people are finding us, making sure that we're able to give them the tools to know what to expect in the process.
And then, so when you think about and maybe that is the opportunity, when you think about the opportunity, what beyond that, and maybe that's it,
yeah,
are you seeing ahead?
I don't know, honestly. In a lot of ways, to be candid, when we first started, I was really on the hunt for a long time for a new space, because, we can seat about 100 people in our theater. And so we have to do everything a lot of times to get all of the parents in. Every time we do a show, we have to do multiple times to be able to get everybody in. And we could mitigate that if we had more room. And I really chased that hard for a lot of years. And then I started realizing we've put so much time and energy into the space that we have, and everybody feels kind of attached to it. And I was really so eager to grow. And now we're kind of at this place where, and I'm being really candid, I don't think my team really, they feel great about where we are. They feel great about the amount that they're working. They feel great about the product that we're able to produce. And I don't know that they want to double in size. And I don't know if I want to double in size, So I think that's kind of the growing pain of where we are right now, is defining what do the next 10 years look like? We've had 10 years of a really big growth. And so what do the next 10 years look like? And I don't have the answer to that yet. That's something I really spend a lot of time sort of mulling and talking with my team about, because those are important questions. I don't want to take that journey alone.
Yeah.
I can drag everybody kicking and screaming, but that's not going to benefit anybody.
Well, and so that kind of leads into the kind of the next part of the conversation, and that's more just broadly about leadership. And
yeah.
So, what you're describing, that is a big strategic decision.
Right.
About that is a huge deal. So, as a leader of the organization, and how do you go about making a decision that's almost inalterable? Once
right.
you're down that path,
right?
You can't
yeah.
undo a lot of that. So, how do you go about making that decision about to grow or not to grow,
yeah.
to move or not to move? How do you, when you think about that process, how do you go about it?
So for me, everything comes down to my key team members. I think probably like everybody else's business, you have your core team of people that really help guide the decisions that you make, because I don't want to go on a journey without them. They've been the integral part of how we've become what we are, and I don't want to do any of it without them. And so we have a lot of conversations, I think, as a team about that. And, you know, I look at where are they going to be in another 5 years. Personally, I feel like one of the things that is really important to me is I'm a super relational leader. So sometimes that means the lines, we talk about this a lot at my home with, you know, with my husband, because the lines between sort of friendship and mentorship and boss are very blurry in my world. And, you know, I work with mostly artistic people who are creative and relational. And so there are a lot of times where, you know, I have to figure out where those boundaries lie. And that's not always easy, but it does give me the relational knowledge to know, like, this team member is probably however many years from retirement. This team member just has little kids and is probably this many years from them being in school full time and maybe having more time or maybe having less time. Or so thinking about those kinds of things, I think, is important in the way that I look at it. And then I just am a big fan of self-reflection and introspection and mindfulness about also how much do I want to work? You know, I mean, truthfully, I'm getting to a point where it's nice that you know, for a long time, I wore every hat. I taught every class. I answered every email. I did every piece of financial work. I did all of the business end. And now I don't really teach that much anymore. You know, I pop in and out of things. And, you know, do I want to go back to pushing and trying to fight to grow and that kind of thing? Or what I'm really passionate about is helping other creative small business owners learn how to do what we've done, because it's not, you know, there's not a single music education program or theater education program that I've ever seen, except at maybe 1 or 2 universities, where they teach any business or financial classes. And that's a travesty, because most people who go through those degrees are going to either end up working for themselves, or they're going to be contractors who are getting 50 million 1099s at the end of the year. And what can I write off, and and is it a shoebox full of receipts that they're going to take to some poor sap like Chris at the end of the year and say, here, help, you know?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Are you familiar with this shoebox method?
I did not know I was becoming a CFO of
of self-employment.
Of a wig and makeup business.
Exactly.
So yes, I'm familiar. Yeah.
I love that stuff. Like I said before, I've learned that I love all of that. And I think I'm in a unique position of being sort of, you know, and I'm really honestly the least creative person on our team, but being a creative person who also really enjoys a good system and process and, you know, spreadsheet. I love a good spreadsheet. Which almost no one in my business would say. I love that. And I like teaching other people how to do that. So personally, for me, if we can continue to serve our families well, doing what we're doing now, and I can continue to support my team doing that, then that lets me sort of branch out a little bit into that as well, which scratches that itch for me. So, you know, I think that growth, I think as entrepreneurs, we're so hardwired to grow, but then there also comes a point, I mean, we could open a Dawsonville location. We could, you know, we get kids that come from Cherokee, from Dawson, from Gwinnett, from Buford, all over. And we joke, we could be FAPA, DAPA, GAPA, BAPA. But like, you know, again, people are hard to find, and I'm really picky about who's going to serve our kids. And if we continue to grow and it grows to a point where we can't serve the families that we serve as well as we serve them, it's not worth it. So those are sort of the thought processes, again, candidly, that I kind of go through and talk about with my team as we sort of make those kinds of decisions.
So, and related to that, you know, culture is such a huge part of any organization and how it operates and delivers service. But, you know, having so many creatives on a team, and so many folks that approach it and even, you know, creatives who are also educators, you know, approaching that. How when you think of, but what are the things that are intentional about how you keep a culture full of creatives that stay creative,
Right.
and also focused, also
Yeah.
driven toward an outcome. I mean,
Yeah.
and finding that balance. What are the things that you do that are the intentional things that create that outcome for you?
I think, working with creatives is, early on in my career, I worked for an organization that was really passionate about defining the difference of whether you were a creative or a systems person. And everybody in that organization needed to fall in one of those two categories. And it really rubbed me the wrong way at the time, but I was really young and didn't know what I didn't know. But now as I look back, I think, man, what a disservice to put everybody in two different camps, because there are lots of people who work on spreadsheets all day who are super creative, and lots of people who do theater who also can, put a spreadsheet together. And so I think for us, one of the things that we do is, truly the best idea in the room wins always. And so, I feel like it's my job to ground everybody, because there's never a shortage of ideas. Like, I answered a phone call at 9 a.m. this morning from one of the girls who was like, I had an idea. What do you think about this? And I was like, okay, well, what if, XYZ? And she's like, yeah, that's it. That's an even better idea. And all I did was save myself 2 hours at work. But, when we have those conversations, to me, if I've surrounded myself with this amazing team of people who are smart and creative and talented at what they do, it's silly for me to stifle that. I just try to keep everybody grounded, because they're really passionate about what they do. And again, it all comes back to hiring, and they're really passionate about the students, and they love our kids, and they want to give our kids the absolute best experience they possibly can. So how do we do that? And, there is almost always a finished product, which is kind of nice for what we do. So everybody stays pretty focused on whether it's a show at the end of a class, or, a demonstration performance at the end of the class, whatever it is. There's always sort of a goal in mind. And so that part isn't super hard. I think the trickiest thing that we deal with is the communication amongst everybody, because everybody, to put on a show, you have a choreographer and a director and a musical director and a technical director and a costumer. And that's a lot of people with a lot of creative ideas all working on the same project. And so managing that and making sure that everybody's communicating comes back to what I think a lot of creative businesses miss, which is systems. So we have a lot of systems in place where, this long into a process, have you met with the costumer? This long into the process, has the director met with this person? Have we contacted the parents? Do they know this? We have a lot of, kind of benchmarks in place, like any other business, to make sure that all those steps are being completed. But I think as far as creating a culture, again, the number one thing is who we hire and who we bring in the doors. But then after that, as I said, we're super relational. We all look out for each other. I was joking, I guess, with Derek earlier. My husband had a lot of health problems the earlier part of this year. And nothing will tell you whether your team is functioning well or not if you disappear. Because I disappeared. I was like, go with God, text me if you need something. But my husband is in the ICU, and this is what my focus is right now. And no balls were dropped. It was incredible. Everybody just felt, and I think that comes from them feeling empowered, because I'm not a micromanager. They just took it, and I didn't check an email. I didn't worry about a thing. I truly didn't, because they just took it and ran with it. And so I think giving our team the runway to feel like they are in ownership of their class. Like, I hired you for a reason. You know what you're doing, go do it. And then come to me when you have issues. Like, I'm the one, literally yesterday, I spent most of the day cleaning toilets, plunging toilets. Like, that's what, a lot of what I do is I try to do the stuff that they don't want to do, because I want them to be able to focus on the students and what they love.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
One of the things that impressed me the most about you was how you pivoted during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You're a performing arts, perform. So how did you find your inspiration to pivot and and change your delivery method and keep your people employed
Yeah.
when they couldn't perform, which is what you've done for.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really scary and it was really hard. And again, that was a best idea in the room wins. I mean, we had a couple of long Zoom meetings with the team and said, okay, what can we do? And you know, when I look back on that time, like here, these wrinkles and those wrinkles, because I was like in my basement office staring at the computer for a trillion hours every day, trying to keep everything on the rails and do PPP paperwork and all the other things, you know, trying to, especially early on when no one knew how that paperwork needed to be filled out and who knew I could buy a Lamborghini with it. But I think, you know, with the way that COVID happened, where it was sort of piecemealed out to us, like it was, okay, it's 2 weeks, it's only going to be 2 weeks. And so we did Zoom classes for 2, then it's going to be, oh, well, maybe after spring break. And then, you know, so during spring break, we offered free classes for anybody. We had kids all over the country take classes with us because everything was free. And then in May, it was like, oh, wait, we're still not coming back. And I kept telling the kids, we are going to do your shows, because most of the kids were within weeks of their final, you know, they work all year for this show. And so I kept telling the kids, we are going to do your shows. We are going to do your shows. And once I said that, I was like, crap, we're really going to have to do their shows. And I don't know how we're going to do their shows. But we had rehearsals on Zoom. It was a disaster. We had classes on Zoom. They were a disaster. But it didn't matter because the goal was just to keep the kids involved, keep them engaged, give them something to look forward to, give them each other. And from there, you know, I mean, it truly was, we all sat down when things started to open back up again that summer. You know, fortunately, we lived here where things did, you know, we did have at least the autonomy to decide what we wanted to do, as opposed to a lot of places like us that just couldn't withstand it because the you know, the government wouldn't let them open. But once we kind of got towards the summer, it was like, okay, well, things are starting to open back up, and you know, we can't have a big crowd in our building, so let's have the kids all come in and they'll do their show and we'll film it. And we filmed, I can't remember the number. I think we filmed like 14 shows in 5 or 6 days. I mean, we just had them rotate in, and then they would go in the parking lot at the end of their show and sing one song in the parking lot. Their parents would scream and cheer in the parking lot, give them flowers like it was a real curtain call. And then we'd send them home and the next group would come in. And so we learned video editing. We learned, I mean, everybody was learning Zoom, but we learned all kinds of things through that process that, you know, we still use in a lot of ways. But I think ultimately that came down to just the team and the best idea in the room. Like, okay, well, here's this next thing. What do we do with that? And again, giving them the autonomy to feel like they had a voice. And we did. I had to put, the only person that we lost was I had a part-time front desk person that I had to lay off, but we didn't lay off anybody else. I kept everybody employed the whole entire time.
That's phenomenal. So a minute ago, you mentioned mindfulness, introspection, know thyself.
Right.
So when, and I think, you know, all that, probably all think this, but it's incredibly underrated, you know, that in terms of leadership and who you are. So, you know, with someone who has the demands on their time that you have between family and work, how do you take, what are the steps that you take? What are the disciplines that you have? What are the practices that you have to do that? I mean, it requires time, energy, and focus.
Yeah.
So what are do you have a daily practice that you do? Is it you know, what does that look like?
Yeah, for me, I have a few things that I do. I'm in the car a lot, and so I use that time. A lot of times I just drive around in quiet. And it lets me think, and I keep a little notebook because I feel like I have the best ideas in the car or in the shower where you can't write them down, you know? So I have a little notepad that I keep on my console in my car, and I jot my notes down, and then I actually have a waterproof notebook that I can take in the shower with me that one of my team gave me. She's like, this is amazing, you should try it.
I tried the whiteboard, didn't work.
Yeah, it's fun. The dry erase won't work in there either. And then I've also in the last couple years gotten really passionate about this sort of discipline or I don't even know what you call it. I think it's it's a behavior analysis tool, but it's called the Enneagram. And there's a lot of like pop culture stuff about the Enneagram right now. But if you really dig into the weeds of what it is, it's a really interesting way to know yourself. And it's to me, it's more intriguing than like Myers-Briggs or DISC or any of those, because it's very dynamic. There's movement in it. And also it's about the motivations of behavior, not the behavior themselves. So that's been a really helpful tool for knowing myself. Like, I know the way I am wired, I value efficiency over almost anything else. And that is not how a lot of my team sees the world. So it's given me the perspective to go, if I come at them hard with efficiency all the time, they're going to be stifled by that, and it hurts their ability to be creative. And so that tool has been really helpful for me. I'm actually this year studying with an Enneagram master teacher as a part of a cohort. I go to Dallas 4 times a year to study with her. And it's been really, really helpful to understand, like, for instance, thinking about like the motivation of behavior as opposed to the behavior themselves. I'm really anal retentive about the way I keep a digital calendar, I keep a paper calendar. My paper calendar is kind of like my running to-do list. And I'm very particular about it because it keeps me efficient. There are a couple of other girls who work for me that are really crazy about their paper calendars, but their motivation, we look like we're having the same behavior, but their motivation is very different. One of them is terrified that she's going to be wrong, and she's worried that she's going to get in trouble or someone's going to be mad at her. And so she's very careful about her calendar. Another one is filled with anxiety all the time. And so she's afraid she's going to forget something, and knowing those things about them lets me lead them better, because we're doing the same thing, but the reason we're doing them is very different. And so that has been a really big part of how that tool has helped me lead better. And then because of that tool and the study that I'm doing with them, that's brought in a lot of other books and things that have helped me a lot. There's one called The Untethered Soul that is kind of about separating yourself from your big emotions and feelings and kind of being able to step back and look. Because I get my feelings hurt, I mean, I'm an emotional person, and when a parent is mad about something, I take it really personally and I get my feelings hurt. And having the practice of learning to stop, separate myself from that, look at it from a bigger picture. Is this really about me? Probably not. This is really about their kid didn't get the part they wanted, or they forgot to read something, but they're mad at me about it, those kinds of things. And so having that distance. And then every day, I've been a little off this week, but every day for 15 minutes, I just sit in silence in my house and I just sit. And it's the worst thing ever. I hate it. But it's really good for my brain, because it gives me, the goal is not to accomplish anything, which is how I'm wired. I want to always be accomplishing something. And that 15 minutes gives me a chance to just stop and just stop. I hate it. But it's been really good for me.
Well, that's excellent. I mean, all of those are excellent. Does anybody else work the Enneagram? It's been yeah, it's great. Great. That's
Similar
fantastic.
disc profiles in a way?
Maybe a little. The Enneagram, the thing I like about the Enneagram, and I won't give you like a boring dissertation, although I don't think it's boring. There's a lot of dynamic movement on the Enneagram. So when you're stressed, you go in a direction. When you're feel safe and in security, you go in a different direction. So it's very dynamic. So it helps me understand the movement that my team makes and the movement I make. When I'm feeling stressed, this is the kind of behavior that I experience. And that sort of movement, that dynamicness, that's not a word, but of the Enneagram has been really helpful for me.
So you're like using that for behaviors, using disc profiles for personality analysis.
Yeah. And I mean, the Enneagram involves a lot of personality too, but the idea is, and it's sort of like, the Enneagram started thousands of years ago. There's evidence of it, in antiquity, of these numbers, these 9 numbers, and everybody falls kind of into a category of these numbers. And so there's a neat historical aspect to that too, that I think is really unique to all of the rest of the personality assessment tools.
I like that it maps to neurochemistry.
And say that again?
It maps to neurochemistry. It maps to brain patterns.
I think that if you're familiar with DISC, a next step is Enneagram. There's 4 big buckets for DISC. There's 9 big buckets for
Yeah.
Enneagram. And it will be a natural progression for you to check that out.
I'm real geeky about it. And I hope when I finish this cohort and possibly do some additional work, like that's the thing I really am
Yeah.
interested in teaching to teams.
Yeah.
Because I have found it so helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and something that looks at motivation rather than,
Behavior.
yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's very, very different. And, you're not supposed to type other people because if it's motivation, you don't know what my motivation is. And so it's something that we've kind of done as a team of like, hey, I'll just sort of sneak it to him. Hey, here's a podcast, maybe listen to this. Or here's a book, see if you, and so I love it when the team comes back and is like, oh my gosh, I am such a 1. I know you are. I thought you might be.
Yeah.
But now it helps me. Like 1s are the ones who are super perfectionistic, but it comes from this voice in their head that's telling them they have an inner critic that's telling them they're doing it wrong all the time. Yeah. And so it helps me coach that person. Like I lead that in a very different way because I know that any criticism I give them is compounded 1,000 times by their own inner voice. So it lets me go around a little bit in the way that I give them feedback and the way that I coach them. So it's been incredible as a tool for leadership.
Yeah, Richard Rohr says that it's the only real tool he's ever found that can let you see the motivations that are otherwise completely unseen.
Yes.
Mainly for yourself, but also,
So I'm studying with Suzanne Stabile, who learned from Richard.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
That's awesome. Cool.
It's great when you learn where you're at on the Enneagram and you meet somebody like Leigh Ann and you go,
Yeah.
I'm an 8. And she's like, ah.
I know.
Yeah. I knew that 2 weeks ago. So. Right. Yeah. Right. Sure. Yeah.
That's what we had to fight before we could become.
All right, y'all. We only have a few more minutes left. So, questions from any of y'all? Oh,
Thank you
come
for
on.
coming.
You know her too well to
I'm kind of curious, you talk about the best idea in the room, like, do you have like a normal, like a regular cadence of like ideation where you guys get together?
That's on my list because we're really bad at that. We only have really 2 times a year where our whole team gets together all in the same place all at once. So a lot of it happens really informally over our front desk in between classes or, a lot of times we'll have key meetings with smaller groups. But yeah, that's one of the things, that's one of the hardest things that we aren't all together more often, but it's just another demand on everybody's time. And we sort of figure it out different ways, but a lot of times it comes from smaller conversations that happen. And then we'll sort of extrapolate it out and go, and then I'll go kind of hit the other people that idea might, and what do you think about this? And so I kind of am the hub of that wheel. And
So
then
who decides what the best idea is? Is it always you?
no, I mean, I get outvoted sometimes for sure. It just, I mean, if it involves money, I'm usually the one who has to make the call. Because they're all like, we don't want to know. We don't want to know anything about the part that you do. We don't want to know the spreadsheets. We don't want to know the lists. We don't want to know any of that. But, I defer probably more often than not, especially when it comes to collaborative things that are about the way a show is running or the way, a system needs to work within. I mean, I defer because they're the ones who are doing it. I mean, I can come down with an edict, but if they're the ones who are engaged in that activity and they can find a better way to do it, then I'm all for it.
Do the kids participate in the idea process?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of things that we do come from the kids. They'll say, well, what if we tried this? Or what if we, and I mean, some of our most amazing employees I hired while they were still in college, and they have stuck around and they have the best, most creative ideas and come up with all kinds of fun things for us to do and ways we can better serve the kids. And I would never have thought of them, Yeah.
Have you changed the way that you do things? You were mentioning when John was, when you.
Yeah, bye.
Have you changed the way you do things as a result of how they handled that
Yeah.
time without you?
Yeah, big time. I mean, I just feel much more trusting because I know they're not going to drop the ball. I mean, there are still things, like I said, I mean, literally yesterday, we have a huge show opening tonight. It's our biggest show of the year. We had a invited dress rehearsal last night. We had a huge summer camp going on, and I was plunging a toilet because everybody else was busy doing important things. And so I'll take care of that, you know? So yeah, I mean, I think it gave me, I mean, I already knew we had an amazing team, but that experience for sure was like, man.
I think every entrepreneur gets to a point sometime in their business, most of us later than sooner, that you can walk away for
Yeah.
a weekend or a week.
Yeah.
And the business will still be there when you get back.
Yeah.
But
And it's
kids
even
didn't think
healthy
that for a long
for-
time.
Yes,
that to happen.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I'm really trying to learn is that ability to step away. I feel guilty if other people are working and I'm not working. I mean, just candidly, that's a thing. I mean, I was talking with someone on the team last night because I was leaving before they were finished. They were doing some other things before. And I was like, I just feel bad to leave because there's still stuff going on. And she's like, you did stuff all day, go home, you know? And so finding that balance has been, because we're open a bazillion hours of the day and weird hours. And so finding that balance personally has been a big journey, especially as we've gotten bigger. I can't be at everything all the time. Like I'm not, you know, there's not enough hours in the week.
Very good.
Have you ever had a child that behaved so badly
His name was Mark.
that you,
Awesome.
Right.
that you created a role where he's tied up in a chair?
No, but I'll tell you, I put one of my own kids in an improv class because he was really shy, and improv is great for just creating a safe place for kids to try, you know, just be creative because there's no wrong answer. There's no script. You just make it up. And I swear to you, that child was a rock in every scene for like 2 years until I finally just, he would literally curl up on the stage and be a rock. And I was like, okay, this isn't his thing. So, and he's mine. So my kids want nothing to do with this.
This is not his tool for growth.
Nope. Nope. He's a rock. That's the owner's kid on stage as a rock. Awesome. Yeah.
So we were talking about hiring last night at the house, and Melanie said something to me that I'm sure resonate with you and probably everybody else. But she said, you know, you should really just hire people from the arts. We will work 80 hours for absolutely nothing and perfectly fine, knowing that tomorrow the job could be gone.
Right. It's true.
And she's right. I mean,
Yeah.
that is exactly how it works. And so having a team of folks that, you know, they know that the job's there tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's got to be
Yeah.
empowering and thoughtful.
I
So,
think so.
all right, y'all. Thank you very much for being here, Leigh Ann. I
Thank
can't
y'all.
thank you enough. This has been fantastic. And those of you joining us online. Oh, and Kimberly had posted a message I wanted everybody to hear. Kimberly Boyd said she and I'm sure I hope she's talking about you. Such an inspiration.
Oh,
So Kimberly, thank you, and Garen, thank you all for joining us. So next month, which is on August 24th, we will be joined by Michelle Prater, who is the president and CEO of the North Georgia Community Foundation. I have had a longstanding relationship with the Community Foundation. They are the parent organization of the Forsyth County Community Foundation, and just a phenomenal organization. She is a phenomenal human being and has a completely different background, completely different perspective. And it'll be great if y'all can join us on August 24th. And then State of the Schools, though, is Tuesday of next week on the 25th at New Hope Elementary. If you haven't signed up, right there you go. You can scan the QR code and join us. So we would love to have you. It's actually, the event is really very different than it's ever been. It's a really full look at all the stuff that goes on to make a school and stuff that we don't see really ever. So it'd be great if you can join us. And I believe that is it. Thank you all. Oh.
Come see Shrek the Musical. It runs this weekend and next weekend. And I'm telling you, like, it is phenomenal. The performers are incredible. One of our Fionas, we have two, but one of them was Fiona at Universal Beijing. She opened Universal China. She's incredible. Like, they're just phenomenal. So it's family friendly. Bring your kids, bring your grandkids. It's a lot of fun. So don't miss it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Don.